an interesting question, because when I was asked by SMR to write an article about it, my board of directors turned around and said, do you want to work with Unilever again? And I said, no, not really. And the reason why Unilever have done it is that they think they have an opportunity to produce a gold standard of qualitative researcher around the world. Now, the first question that begs the answer question is, what makes them qualified to judge? Is the first question. The second idea is the fact that why are they doing it? And the reason they're doing it is that in third world countries, the quality of qualitative research, according to Unilever, is not up to the standards that they expect elsewhere in the world, typically the United Kingdom, yet they're doing the accreditation process in the United Kingdom and other countries. Now, a number of issues come out of this, because firstly, as is the question, as asked, is qualitative researchers have to pay for the pleasure of being accredited. The accreditors, who are a unique band of the great and the good within qualitative research, according to them, are sitting in judgment on people who range in experience from 6 months to 40-odd years. Now, as someone who's been practicing this for 35 years, I find it rather galling to have someone who's got 10 years of experience judging whether I'm good enough to actually earn a living, or indeed go back to my partner and say, hey, I'm not good enough to work in this industry anymore. The other thing, on a serious note, is that the concept that they're doing is actually to be applauded. It's to be applauded for one reason, is that the industry, for a long, long time, whether it be AQR, which I was on the committee of, so I can sit there with some sort of authority, have done very little to actually standardise the quality of researchers across the board. Now, I know Peter Lovett's in the audience, he's ex-AQR chair. It's not a criticism, Peter, but it's an observation.
I'll respond later.
Yeah, no, the industry as a whole, and I include the MRS in that, have stood still and not necessarily coached qualitative research in the manner it should be. Part of the problem is there are so many people going into the profession who have seen a group, think it's a good way of earning a living because I can do that. But it doesn't judge. Moderation is not the only means by which you do a group discussion. Analysis, presentation are important, which is one of the reasons why Unilever's accreditation process is flawed. Because all they've actually asked people to do is to get a brief, respond to it in a discussion rather than a proposal, write a discussion guide which is then discussed 2 minutes before they do a 1 hour group discussion, whereupon, I'm told, we can tell within 20 minutes whether they're good enough to actually be accredited by their accreditors, which to me is somewhat undermines the basic principle of what they're trying to do. I mean, what they're trying to do is to ensure that the quality of qualitative research hits the standard. And I don't think any self-respecting qualitative researcher would argue against that, because that is a good thing for the industry. But what is wrong is that two very important elements of the process, analysis, presentation, are excluded from it. You're not asked to write a presentation, you're not asked to analyse it. You're asked to say, how would you approach the presentation 2 minutes having finished a 1 hour group discussion? Now, I can't remember the last time I did a 1 hour group discussion, but that's a 1 hour group discussion. And it also assumes that group discussions are the only way upon which qualitative research is conducted. What for, in-depth interviews, triads, or whatever. What for, creative groups of 2 or 3 hours, which is something which I've cut my teeth on a long, long time ago working with Bill Schrattman. I mean, the basic standards which I was taught, and certainly one of the architects, Rebecca Weinberg, a much respected researcher, no disrespect to her at all, wants to make sure that the things that she holds good are practiced across the board. But for individuals, not companies to pay for, individuals to be accredited, and the cost of that probably runs up to about £1,000 by the time you've recruited, incentives, got a viewing facility, etc., 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 per person, is not appropriate. The other thing, which the other side of the coin, and finish so that other people can comment, is that it rather assumes that all Unilever's insight managers are really conversant with what qualitative research is all about and are expert in their own mind in understanding what they want, how they want to do it, and I can tell you they're not. Vast majority of Unilever's CMI managers are woefully inadequate when it comes to understanding the nuances of qualitative research. Now, fortunately for them, Rebecca Weinberg has written a manual whereby they can go to this manual to learn how to write a proposal, to learn and understand what the rudiments of analysis may be, and as a consequence, all problems to solve. And that is being touted around the Unilever Word, where all 7,000 members of its marketing department and research departments are going to be on a 2-day learn how to do qualitative research course. It took me something like 3 years to learn how to do it properly, and I'm still learning.
So, yes, thank you very much. We do have an accreditor in the building. Jane, would you be, please give us your view about the idea that a client puts themselves forward as being an accreditor of market researchers?
I think we need to be measured about this, because I think there's a lot in the overall concept that we should be welcoming. We should be welcoming the fact that a major client is interested enough in raising quality, albeit we know that the issue arose in the non-developed areas and the solution which is currently developed came from there and hasn't been retrofitted properly to the UK. But it does allow us to have a conversation with them about how we take this principle, which is we'd like to address standards and get everyone focused on the importance of standards and make it work for us. And I've actually had that conversation with Unilever now. They're not looking to be in this area in the long term. They are looking for a way out so that it can be, so something more sustainable and more appropriate can be created. We started to talk to them about the new advanced qualitative training that's being developed in MRS and will be ready to go in January. Unfortunately, it's only ready to go in January, and obviously, you know, it'd be nice if it would have been around earlier and it could have been an alternative. I think the best way of coping with the problems that the approach Unilever has taken is to constructively help them out of the box. They do know they're in a box. They do know that they've created some problems. But this isn't just a research problem. I talked to Keith Weed, and Keith, who is the boss of the researchers, he's the CMO, and Keith is clear that part of having a programme, whether you like it is good or not, but having a programme which is supposed to address quality in the research side of his group is also to get his marketers to realise that standards are important. Now you can argue, and there are lots of very valid arguments why this current process is right, is wrong. But if we can find a way of engaging Unilever marketers in the importance of standards and the importance of quality, then they are a big ally in convincing other people as well.
Has the MRS missed a trick here, though?
I'm going to say I think they have, because this is not an issue that has just come up overnight. I mean, Unilever, quite rightly, I mean, I wrote an article which was balanced, actually, that came out. That the concept is great, but the execution is flawed. But the basic need that they had was a recognition of trying to up the standard. My point is that the MRS, AQR, and other organisations should be taking the lead, and Unilever shouldn't necessarily be doing that. The MRS, and I know you've been in that position for 12 months, has sat on the fence of these issues for a long, long time. I can say that as a past council member. I know that. AQR, of which I was a committee member, have tried to address some of those issues by running courses, etc., but not every qualitative researcher is a member of AQR. And so, you know, the industry needs to take the mantle, really, and actually wrest it away from Unilever. Otherwise, the danger is that Unilever accreditation will become the watchword by which other clients may say, oh, are you Unilever accredited? We'll only work with Unilever accredited researchers, which has a direct influence, and particularly on independent researchers, I think.
Indeed. Leslie, what's your view?
Well, as a long-standing client commissioner of research, I find it quite abhorrent that qualitative or any other researchers have to pay to play. I've got a certain empathy with your response to Jane, but I do believe the MRS should be in, and other groups should be in the best position to try and wrest this back from Unilever. They are in the box. I think it's terribly unfortunate. I think going back to the question that was raised for us, I think that the poor decision is the management decision in Unilever to damage their brand by doing something like this. My view as an Aura council member of long standing is, I think we've ever seen a Unilever member at Aura, that they play in their own game. They have their own space. They're determined to create their own cadre of researchers. And this goes back a long way. I remember talking to people who'd been through the Unilever process. It's a very strong community. It's a very tight community. But I just think this is a step too far. I think it's undermining their entire history of quality in research to be putting this platform out.
The other side of that is, the old mantra, which is you're as good as your last job, has worked very, very well in most instances. That if you don't deliver, you don't get another one. So to be perfectly honest, it's up to the researchers to actually educate the marketing clients on one hand. But equally, if you're not up to the job, then you're not going to be given another one. So, the accreditation process, whilst it sounds great, I think is flawed.
Emma, you're in the digital world. I'm not sure, how much this sort of subject resonates with what you do.
Well, certainly my expertise is on the delivery of the insight once you have gathered the research. So I am really inexpert in research gathering methodology. My observation would be from working with public sector bodies who try to standardise, who try to fix procurement rules around who they will engage with and who they will not engage with. And my observation on that is that there is a risk there that you drive out any form of innovation. You end up with standardised people, you end up with a turnkey type solution, and I really sympathise with that point of view. You're as good as your last job, and if you are only picking off a list of people who have completed a checklist effectively for you, then the chances are you will miss out on somebody who is doing something genuinely new and innovative, and that would be my fear in that space.
Okay, thanks, Emma. Giles, Royal Mail accreditation scheme, what do you think?
Well, Royal Mail had an accreditation scheme for direct mail, good 10, 12 years ago, where it invited people to submit direct mail to be judged by Royal Mail before it was passed fit for putting in an envelope and sending to their customer base. And like any fad, it disappeared. And I think this is probably the same with this proposal. I mean, talking with an Aura hat on rather than a Royal Mail hat on, when I first heard about this accreditation, I think it was about 6 months or so ago maybe, the first thing I smelt was a procurement department. And since then, I think I've understood that if it is about raising standards globally, and if you feel that you've got an issue with research standards and qualities in, Sierra Leone, India, wherever it is in the world, why are you looking to the UK MRS to solve that problem? But I can see why they want to try and raise particular standards, but I don't necessarily think it's just down to Jane to raise the standard of qualitative research in other third world countries. I think that other people have said it already. I think I can understand how it came up in some sort of strategy meeting that we need to raise the standards, but I do think the way they've gone about it isn't the right way. But I don't necessarily agree with where the blame is all being pointed.
If I may, because you did challenge me,
I did.
and in true question time style, I should get back at that. Yes, evidently we didn't have the advanced qualitative training that we now do have. What this has enabled us to do, however, funnily enough, is have a conversation at the most senior level with Unilever about creating a strategic partnership, so that we're talking about this sort of stuff early with them, what they need and how it can be addressed, and getting them to be, if you like, exemplary good clients as part of that strategic partnership. So hopefully there'll be some good out of this, and it has opened the doors to a dialogue. Frankly, they weren't having before. You know, they were very closed, so we can hope for